On today's show, Darius Garland makes it known he does not want to trade out of Cleveland. Plus, we react to the first couple of Summer League games on today's edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. You can find the show wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. If you're listening via podcast, make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you give us a 5-star review. Make sure you write some nice comments in that review as well. You can also check the show out on YouTube. Just search Locked On Cavs. If you're watching this video, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the Locked On Cavs YouTube channel and click that notification bell. If you're not watching this video, well, go watch this video. Locked On Cavs, of course, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as the playoffs are over. The sports aren't going on quite the way we want them to, but there's still plenty that you can get in on the action with. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. Something for everyone, every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. What's going on, everybody? I'm Danny Cunningham. You might know me from covering the Cavs at places like 92.3 The Fan, Cleveland Magazine, and a number of other stops along the way. And what we found out over the weekend, I think the biggest bit of Cavs news, and we've got plenty of Summer League action to talk about on today's show, but the biggest bit of news came on Sunday afternoon, early evening from Chris Fedor of Cleveland.com, where he published a story, and I would encourage you all to go read it. He published a story where he talked to Darius Garland, Cavs point guard, out in Las Vegas. The Summer League is going on. Of course, a lot of guys that are on the team, and Garland's not alone as being the only Cav out there right now, but a lot of those guys are in Vegas watching the first couple of Summer League games. Garland spoke with Fedor, and he essentially told Chris that he does not want to be traded, that those are just rumors because there was a story, or I guess a tidbit published in sort of the Cavs autopsy that The Athletic ran like 45 minutes after the Cavs lost Game 5 to the Celtics. And one of the tidbits in there said that Darius Garland, in his representation, Rich Paul, if Donovan Mitchell agrees to a contract extension, which we know has happened, if that happened, Garland and Rich Paul could go to Kobe Altman, Cavs president of basketball operations, and request a trade, request to be put in a new situation. Well, Garland went on record on Sunday with Chris Fedor, again of Cleveland.com, and said he doesn't want to trade, that he wants to be in Cleveland, that this is where he wants to be, and those are just rumors, and there's not truth to it. So obviously, this is a great thing for the Cavs. It is. And for a couple of reasons why. So the reason number one, and I'm going to give you 3 here. Reason number 1 why this is a great thing for the Cavs, Darius Garland's still a really, really good basketball player. I think that's something that gets swept under the rug far too often. I don't think Garland gets the credit that he deserves. And listen, this past season was a nightmare for him. He had the fractured jaw. There was a death in his family that caused him to maybe not be all the way there mentally at times. It caused him to be physically with his family at other times where he would be flying back and forth on off days, as Chris mentions in his article. That caused him, I think, and that's not the whole story here, but I think those things played a pretty big part into what his season this past year looked like, to where he wasn't nearly the all-star player that we have watched him grow into in Cleveland, where he was quite a few steps below that. I think that's a very fair thing to say. But that doesn't mean that's who he is. That doesn't mean that's who he's going to be forever. It means he had a bad year. If I could buy stock in Darius Garland this year, I would. I have land on Garland Island. I'm not selling that land. I think he's primed for a bounce back year. And I think that happening on the Cavs for sure, him coming out and saying this to Chris Fedor, is really good news, because I do think Darius Garland is going to have a fantastic year for the Cavs this upcoming season. I'm very excited about what he's going to look like under Kenny Atkinson. I'm very excited to see him alongside Donovan Mitchell again, because just because it wasn't good this past year doesn't mean those two can't work out together. All you have to do to believe that is go look at the first year they spent together. Go look at Donovan Mitchell's first year in Cleveland, where yes, Donovan at that point had the best year of his career. He was second team All-NBA. He was fantastic. It was awesome. Darius Garland was really good too. Darius Garland played, at least in my opinion, he played at an all-star level. Now, he didn't quite have the volume or the counting stats to be named an all-star because having to share the backcourt with someone like Donovan Mitchell, having to take a little bit of a step back in terms of volume, meant that the counting stats and the stuff that matters oftentimes when you talk about guys being selected for all-star teams wasn't quite there. But I thought he was just as good, if not even a little bit better than when he made the all-star team the year before. That guy is still there. He's not all of a sudden not good at basketball because he had a down year, because he had a nightmare of a season with a lot of things that were outside of his control went wrong. That doesn't mean that he's all of a sudden not good. So I'm buying stock in Darius Garland. And the fact that he came out and said he wants to be in Cleveland, that he doesn't want to trade, I think that's because he's going to be, in my opinion, again, because he's going to be much better this upcoming season than he was the year before. I think that is good news bulletin number one. Number two, if we're being honest about this situation, which all we're doing on this show is being honest, right? I don't think the trade market for Darius Garland was very strong. I don't know how strongly the Cavs have ever considered it. I don't know how willing they were to listen to offers for Darius Garland. But if you go through the list of potential suitors, like if we had this discussion the day after the Cavs lost to the Celtics and their season ended about teams that could be suitors for Darius Garland this offseason, that list probably would have included the New Orleans Pelicans. Well, they've traded for DeJounte Murray, and they didn't have to spend a lot to get DeJounte Murray. I didn't think that package that Atlanta got back in return was all that impressive. So you cross the Pelicans off the list. Okay, that's fine. Minnesota, I thought was a team that made sense. Well, what did they do? They traded up into the lottery, and they drafted a point guard. Plus, Mike Conley signed a contract extension. I realized that was during the season, but I thought that it might make some sense still, even with Conley in the picture there, for Garland in Minnesota. That could be a fit. So you cross out Minnesota. San Antonio Spurs. I can't think of a better fit for Darius Garland if he were to be traded than playing alongside Victor Wembanyama. Well, the Spurs right away in free agency, they signed Chris Paul to a deal. Okay, well, that pretty much crosses the Spurs off there. If they sign Chris Paul and they don't want to necessarily be all that competitive this year, they're probably not going to make a trade for Darius Garland that would certainly be more of a win-now trade. So you cross them off the list. The other team I thought made a lot of sense was the Brooklyn Nets. Well, the second they traded away Mikal Bridges, you could probably cross them off the list as well because, one, I'm not sure they've got a package coming back that would satisfy the Cavs for what they would want for Darius Garland. And they also decided, that move said, we're going into a complete and total rebuild. We are going to blow it up. You're not trading for Darius Garland if you do that. I mean, the other team, the Los Angeles Lakers, obviously they're a team that's always going to pop up here, but I don't think that they necessarily had the assets the Cavs would be looking for in return for Darius Garland. So that trade market wasn't all that great. It wasn't. And I think that you don't need to look any further than what DeJounte Murray fetched from the Pelicans to the Hawks. When he was traded from the Hawks to the Pelicans, what Atlanta got back for him, I think probably would have been pretty similar to Darius Garland. And I don't think that was enough to move a player the caliber of Garland's level, especially coming off of a down year, where his stock right now, league-wide, his trade value is nowhere near its peak. Nowhere near its peak. So I think that told us a lot that, okay, he's probably not getting traded, partially because the Cavs aren't going to be able to get what they need for him, to get what it would really take to satisfy any desires they had. So I think that is part of this, but the fact that Darius wants to be here, I think is the third reason to be happy about this, because you look at this situation, it would be easy, I think, if for the reporting that The Athletic had right after the season, where if Mitchell agrees to an extension, Garland's going to want out. It would have been a really easy road to take to where Garland could maybe get a little bit more shine playing in a different situation. He could put himself back in the All-Star conversation. But the fact that Donovan Mitchell, who is, in my opinion, a top 10 player in the NBA, the fact that he said he wants to spend the best years of his career in Cleveland was the biggest win the Cavs had all offseason. No question about that. But it's not nothing that Darius Garland is saying the same thing. It's not nothing that he's saying that he wants to play alongside Donovan Mitchell. And I'm not saying that that pairing is going to last forever. I don't know that it will. But the fact that both those guys want to be here and want to make this work, I think is a really, really good sign. If you're a Cavs fan, I think that's something you should be really, really excited about. I do think it's something that can work, and I want to talk about things that I think need to go right with that pairing in specific this season in order to get the most out of the Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell pairing. That's next right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. You love sports. We all love sports, right? Sports are the best. And with FanDuel, you can make sports just a little bit better because, sports might not be going on the way we want them to, where, NBA Summer League's going on, and that's great, but the actual NBA is not going on. You've got the WNBA. That's awesome. Right now, we've got an all-star break in baseball, so it's even one less thing right now, but there's always something at FanDuel. So right now, FanDuel's hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. I've been telling you guys about my feelings on the Guardians to win the World Series. They have really struggled to close out the first half of the season. It's been a really disappointing, I think, 10 days for the Cleveland Guardians, despite I think they nailed the first pick in the draft. I will send you over to Locked On Guardians for more talk about that, because I'm not going to pretend I'm an expert, but I know Jeff Ellis is. I know that guy knows more about the MLB draft than almost anybody. So go there for that. But I feel good about the Guardians. I think that they're going to turn around. I think the All-Star break is coming at the right time for them. Right now, the Guardians are plus 700 on FanDuel to win the American League. To win the pennant, plus 700. I like those odds. I think that's great value for a team that's going into the break. Yeah, they're not playing their best baseball right now, but you don't have to be playing your best baseball in July. You need to be playing your best baseball in September and October. I think the Guardians are going to do that. So head on over to FanDuel. Start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. So far in the Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell pairing, those guys, it's hard for me to say they've underachieved, but it's also hard for me to say that it's been good enough. It's a really weird spot. And a lot of that has to do with what this past season was for Garland, where it wasn't good enough, but I've got some real difficulty blaming him. Like, I don't think that it's his fault that the season didn't go as well as it should have for him. I don't think that I can blame Darius Garland for that. Because if I'm being honest here, if I were in his situation and I had my jaw broken and I lost all that weight, and some of my issues with him were that I thought got a little too tentative in the second half of the season. But I understand it. Like, I would be tentative too if I were in that situation. So I totally get it. But I think that is thing number one that needs to be improved. I think Donovan Mitchell has been really fantastic at getting to the basket and being aggressive and picking his spots. I need to see Darius Garland do that. I need to see Darius Garland be more aggressive this year in the 24-25 season, much more aggressive than he was last year. I need that. The other thing that I need, that I think is very vital to making this work, I think Darius Garland needs to up his three-point volume. I think if this is going to work, Darius Garland needs to be taking more threes. He needs to be taking more catch and shoot three-pointers. I really think that if these two are going to work, especially with how well we saw Donovan Mitchell play point guard when Darius was out with that jaw injury, where last year he took 6.2 threes a game, which that's okay. But that's the number I'd like to see at 8. I think if he is taking 8 3-pointers a game, you feel really, really good about this backcourt. You feel good about those two together and getting the most out of each other, because I don't know that anything with Donovan's game is going to change. And truthfully, I don't think there is anything that needs to change with his game. He's not a perfect basketball player, but he's really, really good. He's by far the best player on this team right now. And I think it's about adapting to him rather than him adapting. And I think part of that adapting by the other people needs to be Darius Garland taking more 3-pointers. If he's up around 8 3-pointers a game, I think that's a really, really great sign for this pairing moving forward. I really do think it's a great sign for this pairing. So those are just a couple of things that I think need to be done. I do want to talk about Summer League, because obviously that's been going on. The Cavs have had 2 games so far. They're 1-1. They lost to the Orlando Magic on Friday. I've got thoughts from that game. They lost to the Milwaukee Bucks, they beat the Milwaukee Bucks. They absolutely blew out the Milwaukee Bucks on Sunday. So a couple of things that I wrote down. One, it was a bummer Luke Travers didn't play against Orlando, but I will say I was impressed with him against Milwaukee on Sunday. I think that he is, and he talked at practice last week when he was available to the media. You know, he wants to be a role player in the NBA. And I think he is, I think he can do that. I don't really have questions about him being an NBA player. Now, I don't know how good of a role player he can be. I don't think that's something we can really know until we actually see him in the NBA. But I do think he can be an NBA player. One of the things I'm very curious, and I will be in Vegas later on this week. One of the things I'm very curious when I talk to people there is if he's going to be a guy that could be part of the team this upcoming year. Because if it doesn't happen this season, I think it kind of needs to happen next season. Like, we're getting to a point where if it doesn't happen after that, he's probably not going to make that jump. Because these situations, you know, you can run out of time. And I think the time is getting pretty close to bring Luke Travers over. But I absolutely think he's an NBA player. He's not going to be a star. But just watching him in the one Summer League game that he's played so far, I think he's a guy that has a future as, you know, maybe a 7th guy on an NBA team. But in today's climate, especially with some of the new salary restrictions, especially with how the CBA is written, having someone like that on a deal that's very team friendly, which he would be on that sort of deal, is pretty paramount for roster building. It is. That's why, like, someone such as Craig Porter Jr. being an NBA player after being undrafted and being on a very cost-controlled, team-friendly deal for 4 years is something that gives you more opportunity to build out the roster in other areas. So if Luke Travers is an NBA player, if he's your 7th guy and he's on a very manageable contract, that helps the rest of the roster out, especially when you're in the position the Cavs are, where right now they've got a massive deal with Donovan Mitchell. Darius Garland's on a massive deal. Evan Mobley, I believe, is going to be on the rookie max. Jared Allen makes $20 million a year. They've got a lot of money tied up in a lot of places. So having more contributors on smaller deals, something that absolutely does help. It does help in terms of team building. Amani Bates, he's the guy that I think we need to spend some serious time talking about. There's, I think, a lot of good stuff with him right now. But there's also some stuff that still needs to be weeded out of his game. His shot diet is still, and you know, Summer League in Summer League head coach Jordan Ott talked about this too. Guys are in different roles in Summer League, and I think that's worth noting here. They're in different roles in Summer League than they would be on the actual, you know, regular season Cavaliers. And Amani Bates, I think, is certainly that, because there are some shots that he's taking that just seem very ill-advised. And it's not because the talent isn't there. Like, the talent is there with Amani Bates. That I don't think is any question. Like, that guy has the talent to be in the NBA. Firmly believe that. But some things need to be cleaned up. Like, I think the shot selection needs to improve. It's gotten better from last year. I do think from last year in Summer League, it has improved. His body has absolutely improved. I mean, he still looks skinny, even though he says he's gained 26 pounds since he was drafted, where he came in at 170 pounds this time last year, and he weighs 196 pounds now, according to him. So that has improved. I think some of the decision-making has improved. But I do think that there are some times where he gets a little too isolated and puts blinders on, to where if he's working on a guy one-on-one, and there's nothing wrong with, going one-on-one, especially at mismatches, but when he gets in those situations, there are some times it's almost as if he forgets there's 4 guys on the floor with him. And I think that is something that can be a little bit frustrating to watch. That is probably the thing that has been, other than the shot diet, that's been the biggest negative for me that has stood out. But there have been some positives with Amani Bates' game. There have been. I want to talk about those next right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's episode also brought to you by eBay Motors, where passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, style, eBay Motors has you covered with over 122 million parts. That's so many parts. 122 million parts. That is a ton of parts for your number one ride or die. You will always find exactly what you're looking for. And this is important. Listen up to this. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. So the positives that I've seen out of Amani Bates' game so far, and he has certainly had really good moments. Like, I thought he rebounded really well. I thought that about Jaylon Tyson too, particularly Sunday. Like the way those guys rebounded is a plus, considering what the Cavs, they've struggled to rebound on the wing over the last couple of years. There's no doubt about that. I really like Amani Bates as a potential spot-up shooter. I think there are times where if the ball is in his hands a little too long, the rate of success goes down. It's not that he can't do it, but I think that this is a pretty common thing amongst role players, where the less time they have with the ball, the more successful they are offensively. And it's not because they can't create for themselves, but when they've got open shots or when they've got an open lane to the basket and they attack quickly, when they make fast decisions, that's when it's going to work out best for them. I think there have been times, especially on open three-pointers, that Amani Bates makes a fast decision and the shot looks good. It's not always going to go in. There were a couple Sunday that went in and it looked great. It's like, man, that would be the perfect role for him at this point in his career. Like, I think that there are times when he can still put those blinders on, but when he makes quick decisions, it's good. The other thing that I have liked him in, he's made a couple of nice passes in both games, both on Friday against Orlando and Sunday against Milwaukee. He's made a couple of nice passes as the ball handler in pick and roll situations. He's connected with Pete Nance a couple of times where I think it's looked really good. There was another one. It wasn't a pick and roll situation, but he was sort of, he drove at the rim and kind of got his water shut off, and he found a cutting Craig Porter Jr. to the basket. I thought that was a really nice pass too. So, if I'm going to say there have been times where it looks like he's put his blinders on, I have to say there have been times where he's made some really nice passes too. So I do think there is an NBA player in there with Amani Bates. I do think so. I still think that there's growth. I don't know if this is the year that he's going to be in the rotation, but I do think that there's an NBA player in there. If he makes quicker decisions, if he is a little less ISO heavy, if he can, I would be very curious to see if he can operate the pick and roll at the NBA level. Because if he can do that, I think that is a big game changer for him. I think he can do it in Summer League, but obviously getting to the big stage is an entirely different thing. Lastly, want to talk about Jaylon Tyson. I thought he's competing really hard. He's playing solid defense. I think he's rebounding really well. The offense, you can tell he is athletic. The finishing is hit or miss at times. Think it's going to be a little bit of a work in progress here. I think that he has looked like someone that's, having their first taste of the NBA, and that's okay. I don't think that if you don't look great in your first couple Summer League games, it is a telltale sign for your career. On the other end, if you look great in your first couple summer league games, that doesn't mean you're going to be automatically awesome. Like, you also can't read too much into these outings, but there have been some good things out of Jaylon Tyson. Obviously, some things that need to be cleaned up as well. So as I mentioned, I will be headed out to Summer League later on this week. I fly to Vegas Tuesday morning, so I'll be in Vegas Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Cavs take on the Warriors, Cavs take on the Lakers, so I will be in attendance for both of those games. Very excited to see what this group looks like up close. Very excited to see Jaylon Tyson in person for the first time, playing in, not meaningful basketball games, but NBA level competition. Excited to see what Amani Bates looks like in person too. Craig Porter Jr. has been fine. I kind of think that he is someone that the better talent around him, the more he can make happen, if that makes sense. So I don't know that this is the best showcase for him. Also, I am excited to see Luke Travers, because as I mentioned, I think that there's an NBA role player there. I don't know if it's going to be this year, but I think he is someone that absolutely can find himself on an NBA roster. Even if it's not in Cleveland, I think that he has a future in the NBA. So that is certainly something that I don't want to say I've learned so far, because I think I went into Summer League feeling that, but I'm excited to see that in person. We've got a fun week of shows. I'm going to see what guests I can track down in Vegas too, but very excited for the trip out there to cover this Cavs Summer League team. So if you're watching this show on YouTube, make sure you click that notification bell, because content's going to be going up when I'm in Vegas. You're not going to want to miss it. Make sure you are subscribed to the Locked On Cavs channel on YouTube. Make sure you're also subscribed on whatever podcast platform you use, whether it's Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Make sure you're subscribed there. If you're watching this on YouTube and you've not clicked that thumbs up button, you need to click that thumbs up button. That helps grow the show. It's been awesome getting to do this. Cannot wait to talk to you guys from Vegas. Going to be a great time out there as the Cavs Summer League rolls on. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.